So in terms of like the blockchain reference in particular, we've partnered with a company called Suku.world, and are like creating this platform. There was a press release in November last year, where we're essentially partnered with them specifically for doing physical to digital traceability and provenance, which is essentially being tracked on the blockchain. In addition to that, there is a token associated with the platform, which is the Suku token, which is actually about to go listed live, like literally any day. And it's a utility token, which is used in conjunction with the platform as a service, which can then be exchanged for different services within the platform, including engagement for traceability. Anyway, I'll now get into the actual presentation. DreamView has basically been set up by a number of folk that have been in the visual effects industry for like a long time, not just visual effects, but electronic arts, and also doing cross-media platform games, as well as just a lot of like high-end CGI, both in the AR, VR space as well, over like the past like 30 years. But again, a lot of like AAA CGI type products, with the view to essentially taking that to this new market. So what we have experienced in like the last 2-3 years, and this is getting into like the kind of the core business and how that's actually relevant and how we actually set that up. So again, we were basically recognizing that the fidelity of CGI generated products, including like rooms, was becoming very affordable. So a number of companies have been trying to do this in the past. It was literally thousands of dollars per item, whether it's a chair or a rug or whatever. But in the last few years, because of companies like IKEA predominantly, and also Wayfair, they've been like creating CGI versions of their products, because it was far more cost effective to essentially do that than it was to actually continually do things in a physical manner, by actually having people go and physically go to a photo studio and like assemble like lighting crews, directors, etc. In addition to that, there's the especially because of the AR features like AR Kit and AR Core from Android and Apple and iOS devices, there's the prevalence of like augmented reality. So the ability to actually see products directly in your room superimposed using your mobile camera. Because of that, IKEA in particular developed their own apps to like then allow you to actually not just see images, but actually then walk around and see what it looks like in your room. In addition to producing just the products, there's also like what's known as a lifestyle scene, which is contextual, which is basically what does this product look like in a standard room, and that needs to be art directed, styled, and again the same way that would be done physically, but we've now done that in a digital workflow to essentially come up with the images, which is the hybrid which you're seeing on the screen right now. So in addition to that, I mean the blockchain aspect is that in conjunction with Suku, we wanted to essentially have this traceability, not just for like the physical product itself, but also for the virtual one as well. So every virtual product which we create is essentially being hashed against the Suku blockchain. So we have got essentially a unique ID, which is then actually associated with the original product itself. And in some cases, it's not just the actual product SKU, but it's actually the actual product, and this gets into like unique items and traceability as well, which I'll get into a bit later. But one of the main things that we recognized was the scale of this market. It was huge. There's millions of products coming out every year, and we're focusing on furniture and furnishings first because of it was very applicable and appropriate given the complexities of actually physically moving large pieces of furniture around to either a location or a studio shoot. But to essentially scale to like the volume, we were also conscious of like making sure we had a scalable infrastructure. So we basically, the company is set up completely in the cloud. And as such, when we talk about the cloud, there are a number of companies that offer like cloud services in terms of infrastructure as a platform, but that's typically just a web app for like data management, as in like database management, as in accounts, and like maybe some image management. But when we talk about a cloud-based platform, our entire infrastructure is sitting on, at the moment it's Google Cloud Services, but it can also be transferred to Amazon Web Services or Microsoft Azure. And what this allows us to do is like a lot of the data, instead of just images, we've got 3D files, 3D files are far more complex than say traditional like image, and that there's like a lot of association of files which have to then be, and they're also very large and complex. And we have an entire infrastructure, not just for like file and asset management, but our entire team is remote as well. So we've now 25 employees spread across the US, and the entire team is like working from workstations that are essentially being brought up in the cloud. It's essentially an instancing mechanism where we can basically have a high-end Windows machine, which would typically cost us like $10,000 to $15,000 to buy. We spend like maybe $1 an hour to get access to that machine. It becomes available within like 20, 30 seconds. And it's then attached to our entire infrastructure. So the actual file management is also then on Google Drive. So we're using Google's G Suite for like email, etc., as well as the Drive scenario. So as mentioned, I mean, the big advantage here that we're trying to and problem we're trying to solve is this type of scene where we've got like lighting, we've got entire like crews that are required to set up, and it wasn't just the practicality, it's the time involved. Typically, it would take anything from 2 to 3 months for clients, and are essentially targeting manufacturers, as like the manufacturers of the furniture, etc., are then being asked to like provide images as well as product images to e-commerce suppliers as some retailers like Amazon, Wayfair, to then show off the products. And the time frame is typically 2 to 3 months, if not more. And then obviously once they shop whatever it is, then they can't go back. There is some retouching, but essentially what they shoot is what they got. But it's just the volume as well. So it wasn't just a case of like facilitating the actual shoots. It was also then how do we actually facilitate distribution. So we've essentially set up a platform which allows our clients, like I said, we now have like 50 clients again across the US through the platform to essentially do requests of products and then lifestyle images. To basically configure, and based off of reference, we can then do variations. So you'll see we can do like very easily, like change wallpaper, rugs, etc. So we set up these lifestyle rooms and scenes to show off the products. And one of the key things we're trying to explain to clients is, unlike a traditional photo shoot, you're also creating a library of room assets as well as your actual virtual product assets that can be reused time and time again. So once you've built it once, you can then refurnish and essentially reconfigure without having to like do it over and over again. So there's a lot of cost efficiencies going forward. In addition to the pipeline which we currently have, we're in discussions with Epic and Unreal. So Unreal provides Unreal Engine as a real-time framework, which is typically being used for games, but they also have like enterprise tools which allow us to basically create real-time tools to then do things like scene layouts and configuration of products using their engine to then do that in real time, which is also about building up efficiency using our platform. So these room scenes, and sometimes interior and exterior, all of the scenes that you see here in this they're all completely CGI based, just so you can see some of these images. So this is kind of the summary. This is some examples of essentially the CGI layout of a room scene. This is when I was mentioning the typical complexity associated with like a practical photo shoot. This is obviously a fairly simple one, but there's obviously a lot more people involved. And then this is where I was just finishing up regarding like the different variations and essentially building libraries of assets as well as like room scenes for doing variations and configurations and creating real-time tools to essentially facilitate that creation. And this is what I was just left off, which is basically the examples of some of the scenes that we created for some of our clients that are, again, can be interiors, exteriors, and are directed by our internal team. So as mentioned, this is a glimpse of the asset management tool which we are using, which is also cloud-based. And this is tracking not just the actual assets themselves, but also like our workflow and how we then distribute. So when we're talking about distribution, we're essentially not just doing the creation of the assets, which is both the product images plus the actual lifestyle images. one of the biggest complexities that a lot of the manufacturers are facing is like before they were just supplying like traditional just photos to like Amazon Wayfair Overstock, and the more, I mean, one of the biggest pushes that is part of this transition to virtual and digital is the ability to create like a lot more versions and representations of the product from different angles, such that there's less likely, so a consumer, especially when you're buying something online, you can't actually touch the product or see it from all angles. The more images you get, the more likelihood you have of buying that particular product, and the less likelihood of actually returning it. So the impetus for like a lot of these companies, Amazon Wayfair Overstock, was to essentially really drive to get better quality images from the manufacturers, as well as the 3D assets for augmented reality. So they can basically show off those. Now all of these three companies have got a see in your room type functionality. But the complexity is like not, this is not just creating an image, it's like I'm now creating like a 3D assets, and a lot of manufacturers, this is not typical. It's one thing getting a photographer and essentially taking a photo of your product, and like I said, the complexity of doing that. But each one of these companies has also got different standards for like both managing the 3D asset as well as the AR, as well as like the actual images themselves. Each different e-commerce retailer has got different standards for not just the images, the different like views that they want. They also want 3D files so that they can then like do their own lifestyle images, and they also want like AR files as well. So by reaching out to our clients, we're basically creating a one-stop solution, which is basically they don't have to care about which 3D file, what the format is, what the application is. We've through the Chronos Group, which is one of the partnerships which we're involved with, a lot of these companies were approaching Apple, Facebook, Google, etc. to then say, look, we're about to create millions and millions of assets, and there's no standards because all of our manufacturers are potentially going to be faced with this crazy complexity of like us all having like different applications, different tools, and having to then create the same asset like many times. So the group set up the 3D Commerce Group, which was set up in May of last year, which DreamView is actually a co-chair of like the committee for establishing the standards for all 3D assets, not just for furniture, but for any like consumer products moving forward. And we're just starting with furniture. But that allows us to then ensure that we've got a fully compliant, certified workflow to ensure that these clients aren't creating like multiple versions for like different retailers. And we then manage those standards through our platform to then distribute the content going forward. Polyport is a solution that we're using to deal with file security. So one of the other things we wanted to make sure was that we had a way of securing the 3D files, such that whoever it was being distributed to had the license and the permissions to actually open those files to then access them. So they're providing like a security tracking solution and licensing solution. And that gets us into other markets. We mentioned before that there's the ability for like these assets, 3D assets and content, which is also being like hashed in the blockchain, to then be like distributed to the current e-commerce market. But the same content can potentially be like licensed to other markets, like the video game markets or like the visual effects, where those same products can essentially have different representation and be used like in either a movie or it can be used in a video game. And again, we facilitate the license agreements, again, through things like smart contracts and the relationships between both the clients, their assets, and a third party, all through our management system. So getting back to some of the complexities we've encountered, even though we have a virtual and remote crew, we were obviously impacted by how we're then marketing to our clients. And that was done typically at these real world markets. In the US, there's two key ones twice a year, one in Las Vegas, and the other one at High Point in North Carolina. And they were all canceled this year. Some of them have been postponed until October, but typically we would be going there physically, showing off our content capabilities as we kind of start educating these clients to like what the capabilities are. As such, we went with the online email campaign essentially. So it was all remote, and that's actually been quite successful. In addition to that, we are also been offering essentially a free test, because a lot of our clients, this is still a new market and people needed convincing that the level of quality could be achieved for their product, whether it's a rug, chair, table, or whatever. As part of our outreach and marketing for acquisition was to essentially do essentially a free test, which is like give us some examples of your work, and that's through our onboarding platform. Allowed us to like get access to set up a client with a free test, which if they actually then liked, which we've had 100% success with that, and we then pay for the actual test content as well as then becoming a client. So again, I mentioned this is an enormous market. We are gradually expanding into other forms of virtual assets, and that includes clothing as well as wearables. And to do that, we're actually creating our own suite of digital humans. So having digital characters allows us to essentially then clothe them. And this is a combination of what we call digital doubles, which is like recognizable real world people, and then digital humans, which is essentially licensable, unique looking photoreal humans, which can then be used as influencers and are completely unique to potentially a brand or a product, which we then also manage for our e-commerce clients. And as mentioned, we are looking at using Unreal to facilitate that pipeline as well. Such that allows us to essentially go and create poses versus like doing full-on animated content to essentially tap into this growing market. But once again, like all of our content and all of the licenses and agreements, as we expand our platform, the intent is to essentially have this as an on-demand experience where we essentially facilitate and match make the client demands as like our manufacturers with a growing remote crew, of which we've now got about 60 essentially creative artists working all over the world, which are then via our platform are essentially creating content for both the furniture market initially, and we'll be expanding that network early next year to essentially allow and train anybody worldwide to essentially participate in this essentially on-demand e-commerce CGI platform. The goal there is also to then introduce the token as a reward mechanism that allows people to essentially have the utility for services that they provide or services that are within the platform.